Good morning. It's great to have all the kids back here at school. The building is full of life again. This week in our One Year Chronological Bible plan, we have been reading through a lot of the prophet Ezekiel and a little bit of Daniel. As I have mentioned a few weeks ago, Ezekiel had a vision of God's glory leaving the temple in Jerusalem because the people had abandoned him and worshiped other gods. Ezekiel spoke a word of judgment on Israel and on the nations for their idolatry and setting themselves up as gods. He also spoke a word of hope for Israel and for the nations. He promised that God has not abandoned his people. A remnant would return from exile with new, transformed hearts. God would put his spirit upon them and make them into new people. He will defeat evil among the nations and restore all of creation. The last several chapters of Ezekiel are a vision of a new temple, which can either be seen as the actual blueprints of a new temple in the future Messianic kingdom, or as a symbolic description of God's presence with his people in the Messianic kingdom. In chapter 47, which we'll read tomorrow, Ezekiel sees water flowing from the temple and becoming a river that brings life to the world. He says, "Fruit trees of all kinds grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing." The last chapter of the book of Revelation picks up on this image and expands it. John writes, "Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever." I love how Revelation describes the leaves of the tree of life as leaves for the healing of the nations. Revelation also borrows a lot of imagery from the book of Daniel. Daniel was one of the Israelites who were taken into exile in Babylon. He and his 3 friends served King Nebuchadnezzar, but maintained their distinctive Jewish identity and faith. The first 6 chapters of the book talk about Daniel and his friends and how they remained faithful to God during the challenges they faced. The second half of the book describes several dreams and visions that God gave Daniel that pointed toward the future. The visions use strong imagery that speaks to God's people in every age, giving hope in the midst of persecution and trouble. Much of the imagery is drawn from Genesis 1 and 2 and Psalm 8, which describe humans being made in the royal image of God to rule the world on God's behalf. But when humans rebel and make themselves into gods, they become like beasts. You can see that in the story of Nebuchadnezzar's pride, humiliation, and restoration in chapter 4. Daniel 7, which we'll read on Friday, is the central chapter of the book. It tells of Daniel's dream of a series of beasts with horns, arrogant kingdoms who exalt themselves above God and persecute God's people. It also describes the Ancient of Days seated on a throne, and one like a son of man. Daniel says, "As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every nation, of every language, worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. The term Son of Man can simply refer to a human being, but it also is an image of God's covenant people and their true king who comes to rescue them. Jesus most often referred to himself as the Son of Man, using the image from Daniel to point to himself as the human and divine king of the world. Unlike the arrogant and oppressive kingdoms of this world, his kingdom will never pass away. There's been all kinds of debate about what all these visions and dreams in Daniel refer to. Some think that they point toward the terrible things that the Syrian king Antiochus did around 160 BC, when he persecuted God's people and desecrated the temple. Others see it pointing to the Roman Empire's destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And others think that it points towards events yet to happen when Jesus returns. In a sense, they are all right. The book offers hope to all future generations. Jesus used Daniel to describe Jerusalem's leaders. John, the author of Revelation, adapted Daniel's visions to describe Rome and all future empires. The Bible Project notes that the book of Daniel is both a pattern and a promise for all generations. The pattern is that human beings and their kingdoms become violent beasts when they glorify their own power and don't acknowledge God as their true king. But Daniel's visions also hold out a promise that one day God will confront the beast, rescue the world and his people, and bring his kingdom. This book is for every generation, and it speaks a message of hope that motivates faithfulness. In the description of this post, I'm including links to the Bible Project's helpful guide and video on the book of Daniel and its themes, along with a brief podcast on Daniel 7. This Sunday, we resume our school year schedule with worship at 8:30 and 11, with Sunday school and our adult class at 9:45. Kids aged 3 through 8th grade will meet for Sunday school in the school gym. Our adult class this fall will be Spiritual Family Trees. We'll explore how our families and other people and experiences have shaped our faith journeys. We'll begin with a brief workshop on family systems thinking this Sunday and next Sunday in the church meeting room at 9:45. At the 11 o'clock service this weekend, we will celebrate the baptism of Kane McDonald, the son of Brandy and Ben and brother of Kai, who attends our school. See you in worship. Have a great rest of the week.